Meanwhile, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party launched an investigation into BlackRock and index provider MSCI over the company's role in facilitating American money and investment into Chinese companies, some of which are tied to the Chinese military. The chairman of the committee, Mike Gallagher, joined me on this program yesterday to discuss the investigation.
We found that MSCI and BlackRock have invested in companies that produce the CCP's military aircraft, its aircraft carriers, its aerospace technology, its artillery shells, and even its advanced nuclear technology. They've invested in companies like BGI Genomics, which collaborated with the Chinese military to collect genetic data on foreign persons without their consent, and other companies found to be complicit in supporting forced labor and human rights abuses in China. Your pension, your kids' college endowment should not be funding America's foremost adversary, and that's what's happening. We are at risk of funding our own destruction.
Jonathan, you've been saying this for so long. Good to see you. Joining me right now is the Atlas Organization founder, author of The Decisive Decade, Jonathan D.T. Ward. Thanks very much for weighing in on this. Is this enough? I mean, yes, there's an investigation underway, but why were these companies in these indexes in the first place? Some of these Chinese companies are actually already under sanction by the United States, and yet they're still right there for American investors to plow their money in, and in doing so, they're funding the expansion of the CCP.
That's right, Maria, and exactly. I mean, this is, we're finally getting to the heart of the problem here. I mean, when you look at the list that the Select Committee put out, I mean, these are some pretty heinous companies. I mean, companies that are, part of the military planning against the United States. I mean, you've got, aerospace corporations, military shipbuilding corporations. You've got, company subsidiary of Norinco, which is supplying Russia with body armor and assault rifles. I mean, it's a pretty atrocious list. It's the list that you're seeing on this screen right now with the military parade. I mean, that's what we're funding through our pensions, through endowments, as Mike said. So, BlackRock and MSCI, I mean, that is the heart of the problem. I mean, if there are any two companies that are prime movers in how we're losing this competition, it's the ones that are creating indexes that funnel enormous amounts of American capital into our primary adversary, as Mike said, our foremost adversary. I mean, that contradiction is why we're going to lose this war that's coming probably at this point. So to be able to start to, pull back from this, hold our companies accountable, and most importantly, to recognize that China's entire strategy for global dominance is about their companies. I mean, those are the main battle units. Their corporations are what they use to enact their global strategies, and they're getting financed by us.
Right.
So it shows that the committee gets it. They get it, and it also shows they have teeth. They recognize that business leaders and businesses are part of this problem, and that's what has to be dealt with now. And furthermore, I mean, he mentioned the military companies here, but there are also a ton of companies in those indexes that are part of the human rights atrocities. I mean, I wrote about this in The Decisive Decade because you can go through testimonies from the concentration camps in Xinjiang and then cross-reference that with a BlackRock MSCI index and find the same companies that are part of these. Yeah, I mean, I put them in the book. It's pretty alarming. So I'm very glad to see the committee taking action on this, and action meaning, the beginning of showing these companies, i.e. our own BlackRock MSCI, that you have to do different. I mean, you can't do this anymore.
Well, this is probably one of the most important issues that I've been raising now for several years. The fact that the thrift fund is the 401k for government employees, and it too has this option for those government employees to put their money into Chinese companies. I mean, it's just outrageous to me. But doesn't the real tone need to be set from the top? The administration has been sitting on an executive order to put limitations in place to invest in these companies, and they're just sitting on it. But look at what China is doing. The Ministry of State Security is calling on its own citizens to join its counter-espionage fight. Beijing says that it's going to offer rewards and protection for citizens who provide information. Here's what the State Department had to say about that move yesterday. Watch.
We do have concerns over it. Certainly encouraging citizens to spy on each other is something that's of great concern. We are closely monitoring the implementation of China's new counter-espionage law, which, as written, greatly expands the scope of what activities are considered espionage.
And that's just one law, Jonathan. I've listed several laws that the CCP has put in place since marching into Hong Kong over the last couple of years that basically enable them to walk into any company and raid the place and steal their intellectual property, the way they did at Bain.
Yeah, and their new counter-espionage law, which updates one that's about 10 years old now, massively expands the definition of intelligence gathering. So that's where the due diligence firms, I mean, anything, whether you're Bain or whether you're, a lesser-known diligence firm, at this point, the idea that you're conducting illegal activities is just a big unknown. But what this really means, it's about China sort of locking down and getting ready for confrontation, certainly, and eventually conflict with the United States and the region, essentially. So, that's where we are. I mean, they are taking actions here that I think are all clear, consistent, and they demonstrate a broad intent to be ready for conflict with the United States and for, territorial conquest in their region. So I think at this point we should all understand that. I mean, those of us that understood this was coming for a long time, I think at this point have been vindicated by the PRC's actions. But, we're dealing with something that is moving forward on a broad spectrum of policies that are designed for a showdown. And, and that's always been part of the design of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. I mean, that's been the main idea, is that ultimately it leads them to confrontation with the West.
Meanwhile, the administration keeps sending people, begging for communications. China this morning is saying, quote, it is willing to maintain communications with the United States on a possible future visit to Washington. Beijing's newly reappointed foreign minister, Wang Yi. Chinese President Xi Jinping replaced one man, Qin Gang, who has been gone. He hasn't been seen for more than a month. Last week, he's also removed two of China's top generals overseeing the nuclear missile force. Interesting developments here with these changes in positions in the Chinese government, Jonathan.
Yes, and I think it's early to know any concrete reasons, but generally speaking, it probably either has to do with loyalty questions. I mean, that's a main priority, of course, for Xi Jinping to maintain control, to maintain loyalists around him. Though certainly Qin Gang was thought to be a Xi loyalist, and that's what led to his rise to foreign ministry, or so it is often thought. However, the other side is anti-corruption. So those are, I mean, that's his from the beginning has been his primary sort of public platform. I mean, it's why Xi, as we often forget, remains popular in the People's Republic of China. So if he's having a shake-up here, it's probably within one of those two categories, or both, perhaps.
Well, you're also talking about China getting ready, making sure it's prepared for potential conflict with the United States. Let's not forget that the number of Chinese apprehensions of Chinese nationals at the southern border is up 1,300% over the last year. Mike Baker, jump in here. Former CIA. I had to throw that out because something is going on that they're sending all of these Chinese nationals into America through the southern border. It's very strange.
Right. It would be almost impossible to imagine that some aren't tied to the Chinese regime's intel apparatus. Jonathan, quick question. We've talked about the flow of money through BlackRock and others into Chinese companies. I'm curious about your thoughts, your concern over the other direction. So Chinese aggressive investment in the U.S. in everything from farmland to mining operations, their efforts to influence local regulatory policies at the state and federal level, as well as their efforts to influence our neighbors in our own region. And Central America and Honduras is a perfect example in recent months.
Yeah, sure. Well, they do, I think CFIUS, Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States, has been one of the most long-standing and active, tools that the U.S. government has in this entire picture. So reviewing Chinese investment into the United States, which has dropped, very significantly in recent years, that's something I think people have had their hands around a little more significantly, but primarily in the tech sector. I mean, as you've pointed out, I mean, this is a broader problem, whether it's farmland, whether it's other, a lot of it is they want to be able to, feed and sort of provide energy to themselves, which they can't do from inside China itself. So some of that comes from the United States. But, we're going to have this broader problem. I mean, it's not just technology. It's not just capital. I tend to think capital is the most important piece of this picture at the moment. Technology, I think, is being resolved to some extent in Washington, at least. People have grabbed that as the, one of the main pieces of the problem. But, we're going to deal with this broader whole of economy picture. And I think that's what people don't yet understand. I mean, this is about the restructuring of the entire global economy so that it does not depend on the People's Republic of China and so that they're not beating us in trade. I mean, if we look at the shape of the global economy, I mean, on one hand, U.S. allies amount for 1/2 of it or more, depending on how you add it up. But on the other hand, the emerging world is really growing, and that's where a lot of their strategies are focused. So we don't have strategies to beat them in the emerging world. So when you talk about something like Central America or Latin America, I mean, you look at Brazil or Argentina or Chile, I mean, places where we just haven't had strategies in so long. And we're preparing to lose a global game because I don't think we really understand it yet as much as we do talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of the reasons we constantly ask him whether or not this president is compromised. Jonathan, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for weighing in on all of that.